Hello, welcome. My name is Barbara, around the WNBA. I watched the Seattle Storm versus the Washington Mystics. It was a really good game. Both teams came into battle, you could tell. Both teams were just trying to pressure each other. They really wanted to be able to just, you know, not let the other team win, basically. And they came out to battle. You could tell because they had upped their defenses on both teams. Their offensive, abilities were up to par, and they did their thing. For the first quarter, we see that it was 21-16, where Seattle was pushing ahead. Neka was making basket after basket, doing her thing. She was hot. Second quarter, it was 14-24 Mystics. Okay, the Mystics pushed the second quarter, and they pushed hard. Then it was the third quarter was three. Third quarter was 10-20. Again, the Mystics are pushing. They have momentum. They're getting the buckets, and Seattle is not doing what they usually do. They're missing buckets. They're not communicating well, and the Mystics capitalized on that. Fourth quarter, 13 Seattle and 9 Mystics. It was strange because in the third quarter, I was like, I wonder who's going to win this because at first it was went one way, then it was going the other way, and then all of a sudden the Mystics were like putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak. Okay, and they were, like I said, you know 20-10. The Mystics, and then in the fourth quarter, even though it was 13-9 Seattle, it was too late at that point. It was too late that they didn't have enough defense against what Mystics were doing, and the Mystics were hungry for this win. And so basically, the hungriest person, the more team with the grit, the more team with the tenacity, with the aggressiveness, they were going to win. And it is interesting because the coach in Seattle at midpoint had taken out her starters and put in the bench. Okay, the bench stayed in there for a minute, and then towards the end, and getting into the fourth, towards the end or midpoint, she brought back her some of her starters. Okay, now did that pay off a little bit? Some could say yes because they did do 13 points to the Mystics 9 points, but it was still too late. So perhaps she needed to put them back in earlier so that they could actually make some points during that time. But it's you practice, you put players in, you learn from your mistakes. This is what happened. Okay. Now, for Seattle Storm, NECA had 18 points. Gabby had 2 points, which is really interesting because Gabby usually makes a lot more than 2 points. So the Mystics were holding her at 2 points. That's interesting. Okay. Um, Ezzy made 8 points. Skylar Diggins only 5 points. That's unusual. All right. Erica Wheeler 12 points. And then the bench, it was Malanga made 8 points. Tiffany Mitchell made 2 points. And Lexi Brown made 3 points. Okay. So you can see by the points that some of the players that usually stack up buckets were not stacking up tonight. They were not doing their thing. And every player has a bad night. Every player sometimes has a bad quarter or a bad half. And it just goes to show you that Skylar and Gabby were not usually where they are in terms of points and in terms of scoring. So that's interesting. Um, okay. Now, for the Washington Mystics, we had Austin with 14 points, Kiki with 7, Brittany Sykes with 11, Sug with 13, and Citron with 11. These are pretty much the kind of points they make. Off the bench, we had Emily Esslinger, 2, Dolson, 4, Lucy, 2, and Melbourne had 5. Okay, and so basically, you know, they were racking up the points that they usually would rack up in a game. Sometimes it's a higher for some of them, but they were still doing pretty good. And again, they were just hungrier. We saw a lot of you know cutting going on for the Mystics. We saw a lot of ball play, ball handling. The ball was active in hands. It wasn't just in one person's, it was around to each one of the players. Okay. And they made it work for themselves. And they were confident in the shot making, which you could tell they were going to make the shot. And again, they weren't perfect. They missed some shots. They weren't perfect, but they did well with the offense. Their defense, does it have to get better? I think so. In terms of what they did this evening, they did well, but you can tell that because the Storm did make points, that their defense was not where it could be, and I think that they would say the same thing. Now, as far as the Storm, they were actually doing well again in the first quarter, but as it was going on in the second into the third and fourth quarter, that was not the case. And the Mystics just capitalized on the mistakes or the missed baskets that the Storm didn't make. All right. Let's take a look at the team stats. Field goals: 22 of 67 for the Storm, 29 of 66 for the Mystics. And 3 points: 5 of 21 for the Storm, and 3 of 13 for the Mystics. All right. And then we have free throws: 9 for 11 for the Storm, and 8 for 9 for the Mystics. Rebounds: 28 for the Storm and 44 for the Mystics. Assists: we have 16 for the Storm and 20 for the Mystics. As far as steals, 9 for the Storm, 7 for the Mystics. Blocks: 10 for the Storm and 8 for the Mystics. Okay. Turnovers: points conceded uh, for turnovers: 10 for the Storm and 16 for the Mystics. Fast break points: 9 for the Storm, 6 for the Mystics. Points in the paint: 30 for the Storm and 42 for the Mystics. Fouls: 13 for the Storm and 19 for the Mystics. The largest lead for the Storm was 8, and the largest lead for the Mystics was 19. you know, the game was a pretty close game, give or take, where in the latter part of the third to the fourth, the Mystics, they just made a surge. They just went for it, and they continued to score, and they continued to push. They continued to do what they had to do, and there was some um, conflict between uh, Diggins and um, Austin, but they worked it out towards the end where there wasn't any. There was just like some talking going on, and they actually, after the game was over, they actually came together and were talking it through. So it might have been, the vet giving the rookie some advice about something, but they worked it out in terms of between themselves, which was good to see because that's sportsmanship. You don't got to throw hands. You don't got to be, talking all crazy or whatever. You could have a disagreement and have a discussion about it and then squash it. And that's what they showed us on TV. So that was good. So all that said, it was a good game, and they actually beat the Mystics actually beat the Seattle Storm twice, and I believe they have one more game coming. Okay, so and again, the Storm is not a team to, you know, think that you can beat because they're a good team. The key thing is that they need to be hot. Erica Wheeler is doing well on that team. Neck is doing well. Gabby usually does well on the team. So, but sometimes they're not consistent with staying hot, unfortunately. So all that said, you know, I hope that you enjoyed your time with me. And if you haven't already, this is your chance to subscribe. It's up to you. And also give me a thumbs up because it helps. And if you press the bell, then you will be notified of new content when it arrives. Again, my name is Barbara, and this is Around the WNBA. Until next time, go Fever. Peace. Blessings.